I can do a beat, boop, bop. Oh no, I've got my video recording on for syncing things.
Yeah, okay, so just
I guess that'll help.
repeat with me. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2,
Two,
1.
three, three, one. Oh shit.
It
Okay.
was the 2.
On the count of
No,
three,
it
go
was
3, 2,
it
1.
was the 2. We got it. All right.
Okie dokie.
All right. So we are right on time actually.
Oh
So,
shit. Imagine being punctual. Could you imagine? Is that possible?
okay, so we have a chat. Hey y'all. This
Whoa.
is Gio and
Bambosh. People pronounce it
Bambosh.
bamboosh
Yeah,
for some reason. I don't get it. There's one O.
for a long
Come
time
on, guys.
I had the oosh in my head. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. As a boosher, tell me, what is going through your head? I've got to know.
I think it's the frog. I think the frog is
The
what is
frog.
the tipping point.
Ah, so it's like, it would have been a bambosh if it was anything else. But the frog, you think, okay, frog's kind of an oosh
Yeah, it's
name.
kind of a sploosh because he's already like faffing around in the pond or something.
Oh, yeah. The sploosh.
The sploosh.
The sploosh. I can get the
The
sploosh.
sploosh. Okay,
Alright,
so
well,
this
there's your confirmation.
this is
It's
the
Bosh.
this is Bambosh. This is the Saving Homestuck Q&A panel. There is a chat built into the panel. We will not be using that for the Q&A. We'll be using the panelist questions chat. So if you have any questions, put them in the panelist questions chat under Panel Hall 1. I will be keeping an eye on that channel primarily and pulling questions in. I have a little notepad up here with stuff in it. And in the
Oh, yeah.
in the meantime, did you want to say a few words just introducing the project for someone who is here but literally hasn't heard of what it is we do?
Absolutely. Alright, so what we do is the Unofficial Homestuck Collection, and that is basically an offline browser that contains everything that Homestuck was before it started to, I guess, degrade or disappear. It's it's the kind of thing where back in the day I mean, God, I started in 2015, which I felt was late, but that was the point where a lot of this stuff still existed, but you could see it start to disappear. You could see like this part of the supplementary material disappear. You could see Flash start to degrade and be unsupported from browsers. And looking at that, all you can think is, oh God, how is any of this going to exist 5 years from now?
Yeah.
So the idea is that this one program acts as a time capsule to contain everything that in that form that it existed before. And it's been received well, which is good.
Yeah. No, so I remember this. It came out like the year Flash was being formally depreciated in browsers. So
Oh my God, yeah.
it was like right on that final cusp, and even before that, we saw things starting to fail, right? Especially with the Viz site, I believe. Yeah, even before
That was like
even before
a lot
Flash.
of that was a ticking timer
Yeah,
around me. It's like you could see the writing on the
you could
walls,
see
you could
it.
see where it was coming, but when they gave it a date, it was like the 12th of January
Mhm.
2021 or something. So it's like, okay, this has to come out before then, or we're fucked.
Or like right after when people are missing it and they're like, "Oh, we need a thing. Is there a thing?" Day after. That's
Mm.
when you release.
Yeah, I mean, it was something I'd wanted to do, like, I think since 2016. Like, I played around with the previously existing, like, big offline archive by Anthony Bailey, I think his name
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
The read MSPA.org guy. I'd played around with his archive as, like, my introduction to coding stuff, basically, right out of high school. And that was stuck in my mind. It's like, okay, I want to make something big and with everything. And I just kept trying to make like the concept of the Homestuck collection in its own thing.
Mm.
And every single time I'd be like, oh fuck, I don't know how to do this. But as the years went on, I built up confidence and skills until in 2020, that was when I like actually pulled the trigger and committed and said, okay, it's go time. It's now or never. We got to figure this
Yeah,
out.
so there were a couple different offline archives before ours. There was the Anthony Bailey Read MSPA one, which was invite only. There were only a few copies of that around, and it wasn't really circulated.
Mm.
So like you had to email him for that because that was back in the day when, I mean that was back when we had the forums, we had an active line to like What Pumpkin People. That was when they were more heavily policing that kind of thing.
Mm.
So that was something people were paying a little bit more attention to back then, I think, and especially because that was before things had started to collapse, as we've discussed. Um,
Yeah.
there was
I guess a lot of what this depends on is kind of disregarding the eyes of the people who might care that I'm distributing all this shit
well,
under one thing.
so this kind of goes into your question before about seeing the writing on the wall, right? Because as there's kind of a curve you can picture as the original material gets less and less useful, it becomes more and more imminent that something is going to be needed. It also becomes more and more important and understandable to replace it. Like if like a comic just came out and you're immediately mirroring it, that's not archival. That's just like piracy. But once the thing is already abandoned and like needs that support, I think there's more of an understanding in the fandom and in the creative community that kind of thing is needed. An analog to that might be, I mean, we've seen just in the past few months like shows taken off streaming services and creators saying,
I just saw the Venture Brothers thing.
"Yes, oh my
Like,
gosh!" Right?
the creator didn't know that it was being removed until he saw the expiration.
Had to see it on Twitter, and like those people saying, "Yeah, go ahead and just pirate our thing if there's not going to be any way to get it, because the media just disappearing isn't good for anybody." And I think there is a sense of that the media just disappearing isn't good for anybody. There's that famous incident where Andrew posted on his link tree that the Viz website was busted and people should use ours instead.
Man, that was wild.
I think it's still there.
I don't even know if the link tree is still up. I mean, just okay. That whole aspect of official recognition is a weird thing because like the naming it the Unofficial Collection was really intentional.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be like in any way possible to mistake it for like an official product or something that has the official touch of the guys in charge. Kind of because like at the time, I figured it would exist best as a thing on its own. Like if it's official, that kind of implies it has the oversight of self-curation, I guess is the way to put it. When you like have, as a creator, you have an idea that like you want your best stuff to be visible, and you want it to be like, you know, the stuff you're the proudest of.
Because there is a place for like a retro collection, right? For an official What Pumpkin produced offline collection of Homestuck, whether that's the books or the offline copy that they described in like the Hiveswap Kickstarter or something like that. And that is a very distinct product where they would put together a collector's edition, and that's not what this is. It's kind of like that, but it's not the same thing.
The important thing for me, like for this whole thing, is being able to see like the evolution of the content inside of it as you go through. Like seeing how this thing started, not even just in Jailbreak, but even further beyond with like the Team Special Olympics comics. Like that older stuff, you can see like exactly where all these influences came into reinforce what Homestuck actually turned into, all these inside jokes evolving into bigger and bigger things. That's the kind of thing that you kind of need this encompassing collection of content to be able to see.
Yeah, so this is...
And I think it gets lost otherwise.
This is part of like the capital A archival historian work, where you get the relevant material in a place where you can look at the whole thing from start to finish and analyze it. So my personal point on this is you have to read Wizardy Herbert, the original unreleased Word doc draft of Wizardy Herbert. My opinion, that is essential reading to understanding Homestuck and Act 6 in particular. That
one was a big omission. I didn't include it the first time because I'm going to be honest, I haven't read Wizardy Herbert yet. That's my big point of shame. Yeah. I've not read it. And at the time, releasing the first version of it, it was like, well, if I didn't read it, I mean, I'm already including basically everything. Like, looking back on it now, I can say that's a point of shame. Looking back on it now, like in context of today, well, I mean,
it's a really weird work because it was kind of leaked rather than published. There is no authoritative. I mean, there is a version of it we have, but there's no authoritative version of it. It wasn't finished. There's, I think, of all the works we have in the collection, including like the original, including like the original Team Special Olympic stuff, Wisley Herbert is probably the most tainted one because it was never released in any form, except like accidentally. So that's like the most eyebrow raising thing we have there. But I think it is important reading, and it fits really clearly within the context of the story, and especially the themes and mechanics of the work. And if you're going to sit down and analyze Homestuck, it's not necessarily something everyone needs to read before they read it. It's not like a watching order kind of thing. But it is something that I think if you're doing a complete collection of the relevant cultural, societal, inside the head of the person kind of thing, you have to have that in the collection. And that's the kind of thing that an unofficial collection like this one is in a really specific position to do, where an official collection or something published by Viz would never be able to do that.
Well, I guess there's your official confirmation that you're putting it in there. I mean, it was in the asset pack before, but
it's been in the asset pack. It's I think there's a pull request to add it as a viewer to it.
Oh yeah, I'm killing this guy. The workflow here is that Geo does a billion amazing things and then puts a pull request up, and I failed to review it for weeks.
Yeah. So at my job, right, where I do war crimes, there's this agile relationship where there's the developer role and there's the project owner role, and the developer does the work and the project owner is like the person whose job it is to make sure that the work is good, and that's not necessarily the same person. It's actually kind of a really freeing relationship for me, because it lets me like go out on a limb and try crazy stuff because I have somebody to run it by to say, no, don't do that, that's ridiculous.
I mean, from my end, it feels like, like the cat shows up and puts this amazing thing, like this entire mod API on my doorstep, and I look at it, and look at the cat, and look at the thing, and it's like, okay,
yeah,
nice.
The metaphor I've used, I think, is like the cat leaving something dead at the doorstep and just looking up at you expectantly. That's where I am in this situation. But it lets me. Normally, when I'm working on a solo project, I'm constantly managing my own time and managing the work and managing the scope and figuring out what features to work on, that kind of thing. And for this, because we have kind of the back and forth, which it's a very informal back and forth, just like in the Discord chat, mostly asynchronous because of time zones.
Oh god, time zones are the
Time
worst.
zones, they're great.
Like, I get home from work when Geo's already asleep. So, like, whenever I have to review something, it's like, okay, I'll leave this comment for him to see while I'm asleep, and then can't act on it for another, like, 12 hours.
Exactly. We have, like, 12 hours to react to everything. So there's just no pressure. It's perfect.
Because we should probably talk about, like, how we actually got into this position before. I mean, like, the project started as...
Let's do that real quick and then jump into questions, because we do have a bunch of questions already.
Very good point, yeah. So, like, the project started, like, this was exclusively, like, my own thing. As I said, like, I was building up my skills on programming from this. I started from basically zero, so, I mean, if there's any message here, it's that if you want to do something, if you want to see something in the world, you can just do it. That's a possibility. I had no idea what the fuck I was doing, and Geo can attest to that, looking at all the shit I wrote. But, yeah, so all through 2020, I guess there was a break in the middle to work on... Ocean Falls, a comic you should read. Ocean Falls. I worked on it basically non-stop. Like, during my breaks, when we were working from home during COVID, the moment work finished, I would just close the work laptop, boot up VS Code for this, and just get into it.
So this was like, this was basically a COVID thing for you, where you just worked on this?
Yeah.
That's the time period it was? Okay.
Non-stop.
Yeah.
Like, it was literally the only thing I was thinking about, which I think is kind of the curse of working on a big Homestuck thing that just happens. It consumes your life. Mm-hmm. And then, like, by the point I released it in, that was a big 1025 release, like, I was spent. I couldn't stand to think about working on it another second.
And he still
That's like trauma memories. To an extent. But, like, that's trauma memories. That's the kind of thing which you put everything into, and once you put it into, like, your soul leaves your body, and you think, oh my god, I'm free.
It's done.
And then a little red smiley face
It's
popped up in
not
my DMs
done.
and said, hey, I was working on this too, you know?
Okay, so rewind just a little bit in the time frame here. So like we were talking about earlier, you can see the writing on the wall. It becomes more and more of a pressure for something like this to exist. So I had also started on a similar project at about the same time, and I was behind. I was like maybe 6 months behind Bambosh's, and neither of us knew about each other's. I think I had a vague notion that you were working on it because people whisper stuff in my ears.
I was posting, like, some devlog somewhere, but it wasn't, like, a big public thing.
Yeah. But so I was working on my collection at the same time with different focuses, like the mod focus and capturing some other stuff in Viz Media Herbert, the same kind of thing. But then yours came out, and I looked at it, and it was really good. And I decided, I messed around with it for like an hour, and I was like, this is too good to just like ignore and compete with, like I've done for all the other ones that exist. So I tried to like salvage what I had, which was quite a bit that I'm still pulling from to use for that. I think I've just about picked it clean. But we were able to pull a lot of that into future versions. So I had to like show up, and I think I bribed you with open-bound enhancements was my in.
Oh, yeah, the 60 FPS stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the real one, because that was the one I ended up tweeting about afterwards, was that you had the idea of mod support, which is something I'd already kind of had overtures about with, like, you know, replace the entire, like, data file with all the text in it, and you can make translations or whatever.
Yeah, redo
but
the
it was
whole
kind
thing.
of like a all or nothing thing. You replace the entire thing, and that was it. So your idea of, like, what it's turned into is, like, that would not have happened if you hadn't stepped in.
That's like a hard ask, right? Like I come in and so I have a proposal. We rip out all the architecture you've written and put in this new totally differently structured thing, and there's no immediate benefit. It's hard to lead with that. Once I had like a prototype and was playing around with it, then I think that's when it made sense to like, oh, this actually works, kind of thing.
Yeah. Just heads up, people are saying your mic is cutting out a little bit.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna just keep physically closer to the mic, I think is my problem. Yeah, I still don't know exactly how I finagled myself onto the project like I did, but I did.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Well, the trick is you showed up in my moment of weakness and you had something cool, and I said, yeah, sure. I mean, I can't say no to free work in my open source project.
And that's how it turned into a forever project.
Wow. Yeah, alright, so now seems like a good time to move
Yes.
on to questions.
Let's look at questions. I have a few in the doc here. How did we get the flash files for Homestuck? They were just
they're
there.
just all on the website still. They haven't taken down MSPA yet. Like, the website redirects to Homestuck, but all the files are still there.
So for
I think
for a long
I
time,
guess it's a compatibility thing.
for a long time after the Viz launch, there was like an old index.php redirected to Homestuck, but there was like an old underscore index.php that was still around. And for a while, there was like the whole Homestuck thing there, minus a few things where they changed the redirects, where like Cascade would immediately redirect you to homestuck.com or whatever for link redirection. But most of the guts were just still there.
Yeah, like, oh god, actually, you know, it's not just the flash files that are on there. It's like everything, including the text. I don't know how many people know this story nowadays, but back in the day there was this MSPA oracle where before every update, someone would be able to figure out that there was going to be an update and how many pages there were, and they'd post about it on Tumblr, and people would be like, oh my god. They'd check MSPA, and then those pages would slowly start to come in. So the deal was that Hussey had this forum backend, which, I don't know, they'd written some kind of bot to scrape the data from that forum and dump it as text files in in the MSPA CDN. And then the PHP for that site would read those text files and generate the page text based on that. So, like, not just the flashes. In order to create this collection, that involved downloading just all of those text files. So even, I mean, I guess that's the whole story, really.
So I don't know how much of that is still around. I know
It's still around. They never took it down.
I
I've got the
know
bookmarks,
that
so.
I know that there was the weird MSPA profit backend where there was some PHP forum that was just overrun by spam bots. That like it was rigged up like with wires and tape to post these like weird custom formatted text files to a server, and then the PHP file like read and parsed those in, and it's a whole mess. And I have those archived somewhere if anyone wants to look at it. I think
Yeah.
that's where we derived like all the archive data. So we didn't have to like scrape the website. We had source code of a sort for the pages, but we had to write a Homestuck emulator basically.
Actually, I guess this kind of ties into the next question of, by Victoria Z, how long did it take to archive the entire collection? The data collection part was actually not that big of it, because, like, if you think about it, we know what all the stuff we want to archive is ahead of time. Like, you want to archive basically the MSPA and all the bonus pages on it, where, like, you know, if you're autistic, you've got a big, just that encyclopedia in your brain already,
Yeah.
so that's good. The side stuff, which Wheels had already archived a lot of, such as the Formspring and Tumblr archives, just all those Q&As. You want to include the Team Special Olympics stuff, like And It Don't Stop, and you want an ice cream headache. Like, you just kind of make a list in your brain, okay, I want this and this and this. And chances are, at that point, a lot of it was already archived. It just wasn't in one place. I think the big thing we're contributing here is having a thing of it that you can just open and be in one place offline with no danger of link rotting or whatever.
I think a lot of the work, and I mean, because I was working on this at the same time, I had also been compiling just like for years passively, because I am this perfect intersection of like Homestuck hyperfixation and programming and just automatically an archivist, where I'd already been collecting this stuff. I was like scraping the text files since before the comic ended. But I think a lot of the work is figuring out what all tangential content you want to pull into it, right? Because there's stuff like I don't know, an offer you can't refuse that I wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah, okay, those 4 months, like, I guess there was a decent amount of thought put into, like, okay, where do we draw the line here when you just have a forum post of, like, this friend group joking around before anything got made. Part of it was, the reason it made it in the archive was that it existed there. Part of the reason was that it tied into the whole Saw running joke thing that ended up coming back in Homestuck. And part of it was also that it's just really funny.
Yeah.
I think that joke's really funny.
So a lot of it was based on like figuring out and mapping out what the plan wanted to be. And then once we had that, either the content was already archived, or like Wheels is very good, old Andrew works, and Team Special Olympics and the drawing tutorials and that kind of thing. Some of it's just like on archive.org. Some of it is just gone. There are some really, really tragic things that we couldn't put in the collection that I really wanted to and just couldn't get to work. Some of the original Paradox Space, like contributor data, I worked very hard to source, and some of it's just gone. Some of it I had to buy books and scan them just like to find data, but there's some that's just missing. There's the Felt fan comic, which was created by the person who suggested it, I think. Who like was I forget what his exact relationship was with it, but it was like tied to the original bonus commands. And
for Problem Sleuth,
yeah,
when Midnight Crew got involved.
I read it. I remember at the time reading that comic and finding the concepts really interesting and kind of the things it did with the billiards board, and it's just nuked. There weren't backups made of it, and that's tragic to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like, with the things that we could ultimately salvage, I guess most of the work was, in the end, actually implementing it, which goes really well into our next question. by Ghost Opal. Did you have to manipulate the flashes at all to do the cool JavaScript effects? Yes.
Yes.
That was one of the things that was purely out of me thinking, okay, I want this to be the coolest thing I have ever made. I want this to be the kind of thing I can give myself when I was reading this in 2015 and have him just go absolutely insane. And I always felt like, the pages like Cascade, and pages like the Gold Pilot Flash, where the flash expands beyond the borders, they kind of give themselves away because the page is bigger than it should be. You look at that massive blank space below Gold Pilot and you think, okay, something's up here. So looking at that, all I can think is, I have total control over everything here. Why couldn't I do something with this? In the end, the process is, I had to edit the flash itself to call HTML, just to try and redirect the page. The flash exists inside an iframe, which yanks those redirects, reads what it was trying to redirect to, and then sends a JavaScript function to the application itself to actually do something. It's this whole convoluted process because Flash security is frustrating to work with.
I think one of the most frustrating things working with this whole thing is dealing with baked-in Flash redirects, because there are URLs baked into the Flash binaries themselves to insert disk 2 and the preloader for Cascade and that kind of thing, where there's just no way around it. We have to go in and edit the binary and then also hook the browser itself to try to catch those and redirect them. That was difficult, but with Flash decompilers, we were able to get that done for the most part.
Yeah, it was so worth it too. When I actually managed to get Game Over working with switching the entire theme of the application itself between the two things. The original page on MSPA was the flash in the middle, and since the page starts in Caliborn mode, the background's green, and then the flash itself switches to Act 3, Intermission 3 mode, and it's white. But the background doesn't change, because why would it? It's not part of the flash. And I always thought, looking at that, no, we need to switch the entire application. How cool would that be?
Yeah.
It's so cool!
It's so good. I love it. Some of my favorite enhancements were that kind of thing, where we were able to make the panel expand at the right rate to capture that kind of psych out effect for Cascade especially. Some of the S panels, Gold Pilot, that kind of thing, where the original effect depended on some very specific properties of how browsers at the time rendered framed content, that it took some tweaking to reproduce that the way we wanted to.
Wait, did Gold Pilot originally only take up the small frame?
Gold Pilot...
I've only ever seen it as the full thing.
No, Gold Pilot is a super cartridge frame, so the flash itself is big, but it looks small at the beginning. It doesn't expand, but...
Yeah. It's just a huge white space.
Yeah, it's the white space, and if it loads, there's a gap in the page. You can see where the boundaries are. So
yeah, the huge white flash. It's good to avoid that.
So I spend a lot of time sanding the edges off those moments. I think we have a couple in the pipeline already for some of the late comic stuff to hide those seams a little bit.
Yeah.
Another question here: compromises we had to do to the content.
Compromises?
Not really.
Oh, purple links.
Purple links, yes, okay.
Purple links, oh my god. So this isn't a real browser. It's it's running in Electron, which is basically just Google Chrome, but without the UI. So it is a browser, but the actual thing, even the browser UI, is a web page. The entire thing is a web page. So when you have to think about, okay, when you click a link, it remembers that and turns purple. There's actually a lot more that goes into that than you'd expect, because we're not navigating anywhere. So there's no real history being generated in the browser unless you manually specify it. And then the actual rules for determining, okay, when does this link go purple, when doesn't it, ends up being just a pain in the neck, which I ended up ignoring.
Yeah.
But the problem is, there's a page in Act 6, Intermission 5, Act 6, Intermission 5, where it relies on the links being purple for you to remember which characters you've read or not. So I had to, for that specific page, code thing which turns those specific links purple, and none of the other links in the collection turn purple.
It turns out to be quite expensive to maintain a list of every link you've ever been to and then process for every link what the color should be. Normally the browser handles that itself, but the reason it's so fast, the collection is so fast as compared to like a browser, is it's a view app, which means, as you said, it's not a real link. So we had to simulate that for a couple pages, and it's just kind of bolted on there. It's kind of just bolted on there.
I mean, I don't even know if replicating the full purple link is a good idea. Maybe it is. Like, I think we've talked about it a couple of times, like trying to make it work completely, but you know, expensive. Yeah. There's a lot that could go wrong.
Quick questions. Are there secrets in the collection that people haven't found? Yes. Is there a Linux build? Yes. No. So the question is there a Linux build in the working? And the answer is there is a Linux build. It's out there. You can get it already.
Should have been one from the start.
There was one from the start on the GitHub. I believe there is now. No, I don't believe. I know that there is now a Flatpak. So
yes, someone set that up for us.
If you use Arch,
I got to look up their name.
If you use Arch, you can grab it off the FlatHub repo, which is very nice. Flash Player can still be downloaded. So
GraphCube. It was GraphCube.
Yes, it was. Flash Player can still be downloaded, so why can't it be embedded into websites instead of the browser? This is a weird technical question where browsers used to support the Netscape Navigator plugin API for weird things like the Java browser plugin and the Flash browser plugin and the Silverlight browser plugin, where some companies could write their own binaries for processing content and stick it in the browser and use it that way. And that was a better system, actually, for dealing with DRM for a couple of technical reasons. But that has been phased out for a long time. Flash was, for a long time, the only one left, the last in a long line of browser plugins.
That was mostly a compromise as well. It was always a security issue, and browsers always have wanted it gone basically since Apple decided they wouldn't support it on the iPhone. But it was used in so much content that they just had to leave it in there, but they progressively put more and more warnings.
Yeah, but
like removing it in the end was an act of basically like, go on, get out of here, we hate you.
But the tech that like the plugin uses is totally different than the tech the offline player uses, which is it's not open source, it's all proprietary code. They have the desktop version of Flash Player, which you can download and run things in. There is the old browser plugin version of Flash, which is what we ship alongside the collection. When you get the collection and run Electron in the browser, that browser is using native Flash. There's also the
interesting quirk there is that we're stuck on an older version of Electron from before they manually prevented you from loading that plugin.
I think Electron still lets you do it, but there's...
Wait, really? I swear I tried that and it got some errors.
Yeah,
we should try that.
It's a pain for a number of reasons. It's not easy anymore. I think there are some edge cases that don't work, is what it was. So
you're cutting out a bit more.
So
now,
when you run the Electron version, you are running native Flash. There are also websites that use the Ruffle emulator, which is a true Flash emulator where they've rewritten parsers for the entire thing in native Rust that runs in the browser. So that is a Flash emulator. We have one of our more recent features is experimental Ruffle support in the collection. So the collection will run a Flash in Ruffle rather than the Flash player if your Flash binary is not working for some reason, if you're on a weird architecture, or if you just want to test it. We have that now.
I think the dream is like one day that you can have a version in a browser with Ruffle, so like you can view it online if you want or have a collection. It just depends. I mean, a lot of it is that Ruffle doesn't fully support every single Flash yet. It's still getting support for ActionScript 3. But it is a thing that in the future will happen for sure.
It doesn't support ActionScript 3. The performance is not as good as the native Flash binary. So like Cascade is so big that it doesn't run at full speed even in Ruffle. It's not as... I mean, it's very mature, it's very good, but it's not as good as Flash was, unfortunately. Wizardy Herbert, we talked about that a little bit. It's in the collection. The files are in the collection. There is I believe there's currently a pre-release. Later that will be a real release that has a built-in reader for Wizardy Herbert. We are including it. It's not finished. There's some brief instructions about that.
I love bugs. Bugs are great. Bugs are great, especially when they work on Geo setup, and then I try it and it doesn't work on mine, and we have no idea why. That's just the best.
Yeah, is that the one where you can't get it to run yet?
I can get it to run. I think it just doesn't load whatever plugin you were using to embed the EPUB. Whole thing.
We're working on it.
Next question, Sharpie Bath. Is there any way to conserve post-Act 5 Homestuck online or in book form?
Yeah, the collection.
In book form, that's up to Viz.
Yeah, the collection is how you conserve post-Act 5 Homestuck. We've done it.
I'm so sad that Viz stopped publishing those books. I've got them. I like having big, heavy books on my shelf. Even if they're not the best way to read them, they're colourful. They've got cool art on the front and back.
Yeah,
I would like to buy more. Please, Viz.
I have the full set of the new hardbacks. I have a partial set of the old softcovers from Topatico.
Yeah, same. I've got 2 copies of Problem Sleuth Volume 3 because they shipped me one with a torn up spine. I sent them a picture and then they sent me another one.
They did this.
Nice.
I had the same thing with I think Act 3 or Book 3.
Nice. Those books get torn up spines in the mail.
Yeah, I have a...
And yeah, so Viz stopped like right before Cascade. Like if you're going to stop anywhere, stop at Cascade, please. Yeah, that'd be good to have.
There's this very bizarre pause in printing they've done, and it's kind of unclear why they've done that, or if they're going to resume, or if it's a matter of their interest in the property, or if they're having difficulties coordinating with people. We don't know.
Yeah. Speaking of which, has Viz by Gallows Calibrator, has Viz Media approached us in any way? No. And I mean, if you'd asked me a few years ago, I'd say I'm more happy about it, because if they were to contact me in any way, I'd expect it to be legal, considering I'm distributing their whole thing that they own. Silence is good in this case, I think.
So one of the things that we have sort of thought about is it is open source. So if they wanted to distribute it or distribute something based on it, they could. But they've not done that either. So
I mean, part of it is from the GPL3 thing, I think, where we license it so that if you make derivative work of it, you have to make that open source as well. And, as big old money companies, capitalism, that's disincentivizing them.
But yeah, we may yet hear from them. But we've not yet, I can say.
Yeah. Wouldn't turn it down, just, haven't heard anything yet.
I would cautiously talk to them about stuff.
I guess following that up, Ghost Opal, additional questions. Have you run into any copyright issues with the Homestuck collection? And also, what was the hardest part of development? Will MSPFA comics be ported? I imagine a lot of people, creators and readers, would save those adventures offline. First ones, like we said, so far, no copyright issues. Don't know how much of that is luck, or how much of it is just not being noticed, or what. I just haven't heard anything, and I'm happy to keep it that way.
So I want to bundle that question with another question I have on this list about Homestuck Squared. One of the reasons, and a lot goes into this thought process. One of the reasons that we did not want to include Homestuck Squared in the collection is that it is still an ongoing project with creators, and at the time there was a Patreon. It's still, ostensibly in progress as a commercial work that people can pay for and have it written. So we don't want to step on those toes. We want to be good members of the community in that sense. Where what this is focusing on is either stuff that could be or is lost, or supplementary material that you'd want attached to it that is in danger of being lost in the future. I think part of good stewardship here and doing responsible archival is choosing what you save and how you present it. In some cases, I have stuff saved that we're not adding to the collection yet, unless something would have to change for me to say, okay, yeah, this has been abandoned, this is worth sharing.
Yeah, a lot of this is like, as time moves on inexorably, there's moving goalposts for like, what does or does not deserve to be included. So, where the bar may have said, maybe not a few years ago, maybe a few years from now, it will be the right time. It's
Mhm.
just, it depends.
Yeah. There are other reasons I don't want to archive Homestuck Squared yet. One of the big ones is it's not finished, and I don't like wrapping something up, putting a bow on it, saying this is the definitive version of a thing. If it's not finished, if it's still in progress,
Yeah, like if there's a
yeah,
chance, like we put in all the updates that exist now, and then in however long from now, if they come back to finish it, we then have to say, okay, now here's the rest of
yeah,
Homestuck Squared. It feels unnecessary
yeah.
to do that.
And that's like, I know that we're not going to get Wizardy Herbert at this point, but like Homestuck Squared could still happen. I mean,
Yeah,
according to news, is still happening. So
yeah.
that's not really a candidate in my mind for this kind of archival.
Yeah.
This
That
is.
other part of that
Go ahead.
question, unless you still have something to say.
I was gonna bridge off that, but go ahead.
Yeah, the MSPFA comics. Do you have anything to say about
Yes.
those?
Okay, that's what I was gonna bridge to. This is
Nice.
one of the difficulties I've had with MSPFA because a lot. So yes, we are working on an MSPFA reader as a feature for the app. You'll be able to have mods, and the mod will have a fan adventure in it, and you can read the fan adventure in the app and not worry about Imager going down and not worrying about any of that stuff because you'll have the comic offline.
Oh, you're dropping out really bad right now.
Oh, I am. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that any better?
Keep going, we'll see.
Okay. So yes, we want to do offline archives of fan adventures as well. It's the kind of thing I want to have for the felt, but we don't have for the felt. But a lot of fan adventures are still in progress, and this is kind of a weird area where is it just a viewer for the fan adventure, and if so, isn't it just exactly the same as the website? What I kind of want to do is base this around packaging up, putting a bow on finished fan adventures that are ready to like be archived and preserved rather than the stuff that's still in progress. So a band,
I guess
yeah,
it's important to specify whether that's like an official thing or something where people download fan adventures and include them on their own as additions for themselves.
yeah. So my current design is that like a mod would have a fan adventure in it, and it would just plug in like a expansion pack. Homestuck 3 and Knuckles.
Homestuck 3 and Knuckles, holy shit.
Hmm.
Can we get Homestuck Blue Balls? I mean, that's every update, isn't it?
So yes, we're doing that. We want to save some adventures offline. Probably not. I mean, you could, if you wanted to, you could make an offline archive of a fan adventure every day, and have 1,000 versions of it. But that's not what we're gearing for. Um,
Blue Spheres, it's Blue Spheres, I'm so sorry.
yeah,
Except
I
for
wasn't
in
going to
the
call
other
you on
places
it.
where they did translate it as Blue Balls, because there are multiple translations of it. Who's the real fan now?
I think Origins says balls. I'm
Yeah,
making that up.
that's why it's the best one.
Um, Lightning round. If I update to the new version, will I lose my open tabs? No. The only big version update is the 1 to 2 jump because we had new assets for the asset pack. Everything.
Yeah, that was something I wasn't expecting to do at first. So, like, thinking, oh god, version 2, we need to include more
It
things.
turned out we forgot stuff.
Yeah, we're trying to avoid that in the future.
Yeah, so
if possible.
we don't, that giant like 4 GB download for the asset pack, we don't anticipate ever asking you to replace that ever again. You should just be able to update the app in place from now on, and it should build on itself rather than needing a whole new download. You shouldn't lose your features. You shouldn't lose your settings. It should be safe to update.
We are jinxing ourselves by saying this, but also we will never be wrong. We are so correct all the time.
Yeah. It's perfect this time, we're sure. No changes will ever be needed. Do I know anything about Hiveswap Act 3? No.
No.
Nope.
We are unofficial.
I didn't even finish the end of James's panel, so I know less than you do.
Yeah. This is just our own bubble that we exist in here. Looking forward to it. Yay.
Has Viz approached us? No. Lucky moment, something that just worked, or a file that was miraculously preserved.
some miraculously kept backup of a file.
Or something that just like worked. There's a bunch of stuff that just worked.
I mean, I found the opposite in that every single thing I did, there was always one exception.
Yeah.
That was the rule I found was true of anything I tried to add to the collection, no matter what, is that I would make a rule for something, and then there would always be one page, or one flash, or one circumstance where I had to write completely bespoke behavior because Hussey did some insane shit, like the passwords or the flashes, or or just anything.
Yeah.
So I would say... Yeah, nothing.
The nature of it is that there are a lot of like one-off cases where you have to code some special behavior. Like the open-bound flashes don't all work the same way.
Oh my god, yeah.
HTML5s, they're not flashes. Iframes. But they're different.
Yeah,
they're not structured the same.
That's that. The whole getting those things to run requires completely different logic to getting the flashes to run. Then what pages like... some of the flashes had, like the full screen ones, like Game Over, they had to have an entirely new page built for them specifically. I mean, I guess that's how there was on the site. But when...
We have at least 4, I think 5 full variants of the Homestuck page for full screen flashes. I think Echidna has its own page.
Oh, yeah. The Echidna does. The whole double page for Act 5, Act 2 combo.
Yeah, lots of variants. For me, I think that like slotting into place moment came with the mod API for the big 1 to 2 jump, because most of the development for the mod API was very, very dry resource logic. And as soon as like I had to, once we had like all these cases piled up on each other, then there's some work to go in and refactor it and consolidate stuff and you know, shake it down. So immediately I went in and nothing worked. And for like 90% of writing the mod API, nothing worked because I had torn out the guts and was rewriting it all from scratch. And then, but like at the end of that, once all like the last mechanic was in place, just seeing stuff work and chain off each other was really nice. Where like once the resource logic was in place, stuff redirected, we could apply patches, mods worked, text worked, you could search it. Just like once the structure is there, then stuff falls into place, which is annoying because you don't get to see it happen live. It's not like, I guess like art, if you're drawing, you do at least kind of see the structure of the thing as it comes along. For some of the work I do, I don't get that. So it's very nice seeing stuff finally work at the end.
Yeah, for sure. Next question. Have you ever considered the library having a reader pull from a server rather than a downloaded library? I think part of the charm of at least the offline application is that as much of it is offline as possible. It's like there are some online integrations like the Bandcamp player that hooks directly to the internet. I considered including all the music at one point, but that like doubles or triples the size of the download, and a lot of it is stuff that, you know, the artists who made that music are still making money from it. You can go and buy it right now, and you should, because it's all good music. So being able to play it directly from the Bandcamp in the app was a concession I made, and there's been a few more things, like update checking when Geo came around. But yeah, being able to have a offline thing that will continue to work in its fullest function forever is the ideal experience for me. What are your favorite mods for the collection?
To answer the question, am I still on?
There's a few. Yeah, last question, okay. There's a few.
No. Can you still hear me? I just changed my noise settings.
Oh, shit, yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna finish that last question. So yes, I've toyed with like the mechanics of having it pull from a server to like cut down the size of the asset pack, but like for the main use case of the collection, I think as Bambosh said, it makes more sense for the intended use to be an offline collection, and then if you want to hack at it to get stuff to work offline or online, you can, and there are like a few edge cases with Bandcamp, but I think its niche is being an offline collection.
Yeah. favorite mods quickly. Off the top of my head, the one that replaces that one sample from John's Fat Beat Machine with John Do the Windy Thing. That was something, I forget who did it, but when one of the links went offline that the original Flash linked to, it got hijacked with a link to John Do the Windy Thing, and that was playing in the Flash in Homestuck.
Oh,
Someone
yes.
recreated that as a mod, and I think that's hilarious. Mr. Cheese did it. That was amazing.
Yeah.
The slur replacer and the quirk removers, just like two things which I think can make reading this entire thing so much easier for a lot of people, and they're just really good to have the option to have. Even if they're not official inclusions, I think the fact that it's possible to do that with this just makes it a billion times better.
My favorites are the Read MSPA mod that adds like transcripts to flashes because it makes the comic actually searchable. Because all the footnotes and all the comments feed into the search function, so I can search for stuff that happens, and I don't remember when it happened. It turned out it was in an Alternia bound flash, and I can still find it. So just for a quality of life thing, that's huge. And the footnotes, I'm boring. I like the real functional stuff.
That's good. Footnotes. So there's like the commentary mod footnotes, and there's also just the ones. Isn't there a mod somewhere that turns all the news posts into footnotes under the page around the time when the news post would have been made?
Yes, there's a really interesting one that like adds the news posts to the bottom of the page.
Yeah, that one's really cool.
Homestuck translations, we probably would not bundle that with the collection, but we do want to encourage that to be made as mods, and we have some space on the wiki for. There's a small wiki built into the Git repository for that kind of thing to be. I can also imagine some translations are currently in the form of fan adventures, and once we have fan adventures working, the translation that already exists could be plugged just directly in using that functionality.
Yeah.
There was one more question on here I wanted to get.
Okay, we got 10 minutes. Got to be quick.
Stuff like an expansion pack that includes the songs. So for music specifically, one of the features on my timeline, I could work on this full time, but I can't because I'm not paid anything.
Or you're cutting out again.
Am I? Okay.
It just keeps happening.
So
it keeps happening.
I think that my recording will be better than the Discord version, and that will be clear to listen to because I'm recording it.
Yeah, the VOD should be okay.
Yeah, the VOD should be good. For music specifically, I want to use some of the really, really good work that the Homestuck Music Wiki has done, and replace some of our old crusty metadata with their new nice metadata with the updated names and sources and that kind of thing. A mod could add like music to it if a mod wanted to, but again, that would be very expensive because of space, and you'd have to find a way for people to source the music themselves because it is still for sale.
Speaking of expensive, like finding places to put these downloads that wouldn't cost me like hundreds of $1,000s in the long run, like that freaked me out when it came time to release this thing. Like distributing a 4 GB file to like potentially tens of thousands of people is really scary when it comes down to it. So thank you, MediaFire, for ad supported hosting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there a nice list of the commentary and the news posts? Commentary, no. The news posts, the collection does have a page for the news where you can see all of the news posts archived. Thanks Wheels, I think, for that. Where you can see chronologically all of the news posts that ever existed, which is very nice. Commentary, there are spreadsheets people have made. I think the Homestuck Reddit has a spreadsheet of the commentary if you want to read that. The extension just plugs that into the footnotes, so you see that on the bottom of the pages. One of the questions we've gotten a lot of here, and I'm going to close out the panel now. I think we've covered the panel. I want to get one more question here. The top two asks we get on the collection all the time are finding a way to bring it to mobile devices, iOS and Android, or just finding a way to get this on the web for stuff like Chromebooks. Which, I can't really build for a Chromebook because that just runs like web pages.
Yeah, just like making different builds for a lot of these systems would involve re-architecting the entire thing. Like a phone app isn't necessarily just a web page unless you do some unless you just make it a web page.
So at first, I was just automatically against this because 4 gigabytes is a tiny ask for a weird webcomic that you don't know if you want to read or not. You should be downloading, tens of hundreds of gigabytes for stuff like that all the time. And mobile isn't even a real medium. That's not a thing. That's just like a toy you have in your pocket. But then people kept asking me, and I realized it would be really impractical and time-consuming to do something like this, which meant I had to do it. So I am working on, just personally as a thing I'm working on, not necessarily Bambosh, not necessarily the project itself. This is kind of a hanging additional thing on the project. I have a beta version of the Homestuck collection that works in a browser. I will post the link to that in the chat, and y'all can play with it.
It's
really interesting.
Kind of incredible.
It mostly works.
It works more than I expected it to.
It works, it took a while to get the polish up on a level I was happy with. I posted in the questions chat, hang on. It took a while to get the polish up to levels I was happy with because we had to do things like squeeze Ruffle in there. We had to do some weird things for all of the stuff that the browser used. Because, again, there's no theme, there's no desktop, there's no file system. A lot of the backend had to be redone. But it works really well just as a comic reader. We even have some mods built into it that work. It takes like a while to load. It's big.
Yeah. It's big, and I'm very sorry for your server and however it's going to handle like the hundreds of people probably trying to click it now.
Yeah, this is going to be rough.
That's Homestuck tradition. I think one of the cool things about this existing is that it's kind of an immediate place for Geo to be able to try like some of the crazy things which even I may have not said yes to in terms of putting it in the real collection. So, this is like the experiment branch that everyone can see.
In addition to the latest development version this is running a couple weird features that don't exist in the main repo yet and don't exist on any release that I'm testing, like MSPFA support. The current working draft of MSPFA support is there in the browser version. You can read RubyQuest. There is
RubyQuest. Wizard classic.
Wizardy Herbert is there.
Yes.
It works fairly good on mobile devices. It
is good.
If you have a mobile device that's like 650 pixels wide, which it has to be to fit Homestuck in it, it works pretty well. It's not like automatically perfectly mobile optimized like Viz was supposed to do, but the page reader at least is pretty good. And this is a beta thing I'm working on, so I will actively be tweaking that. If you run into issues on the website that don't show up in the desktop version, send those to me, Geo. I have a page on the website for that. Let me know of bugs. Let me know if you like it. Let me know if you hate it. This does use a couple like weird experiment wired together things like we were talking about. The CDN that sources images from remote servers. This does some of that in the background. This uses a tiny piece of all the technology that we've been working on for like the last 2 years. It builds on all of it, and all of it was necessary. So maybe this was my secret end goal all along. I don't think it was.
I think it's valuable to have this exist as a thing, just in general. Like, people need an online version of this. People have been asking for it, and Viz isn't giving it to them. And I think that's just kind of what the Homestuck collection means. It's giving a proper form to read this shit to everyone. You can have an offline version. You can have the online version. You can read it in whatever way is best and in the best way.
Yeah,
ideally.
I see this as like a try before you buy kind of thing. So if you're thinking about getting into Homestuck or you're recommending Homestuck to a friend, this is a really good way to get into it. It's not going to be as fast as the desktop version. It's not going to run Flash as well, but it's designed to be like an on-ramp, and I think it's a good like introduction on-ramp. Homestuck Lite.
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of thing.
I mean, Homestuck Lite's something a bit short. It is all of Homestuck there. So,
Yeah, if you want,
I mean, you could just read that whole thing.
just for fun,
it is that.
Just for fun, I'm going to cut off right before Cascade, and that's the whole
So
comic.
no one has to see how Cascade runs.
Yeah, I'm gonna have it capture exactly the book run.
Oh man, yeah. This is the Viz experience, guys.
Yeah. So, get in touch with me. We are at time. I'm gonna stop recording in just a little bit. I'm gonna look at my server and see that it's maxed out. But yeah.
I mean, thanks for the great panel, guys. That was really great.
Thank you for the
Going into
questions.
this, I've never done anything. I was nervous, but this is cool.
If you loved this, we've done one thing like this similar in the past. We were on the Live Laugh Stuck podcast. And so if you're desperate for more stuff exactly like this, I have an episode of a podcast link I can send you.
Yeah. Speaking of things that we're working on, I specifically have been putting a lot of my effort recently into Ocean Falls.
Ocean Falls.
You should read Ocean Falls if you like all the crazy stuff I do and wanted to put into the collection, especially with the flashes and the JS stuff. Basically, all of that energy and creative stuff is going into Ocean Falls right now.
I really
it's a fantastic webcomic by Knights. We work on it with her and a good friend, Hadronis. Check it out. It's great. You're going to love it.
I really want to read Ocean Falls. It's on my list. For me, I have a website, I'm.GiovanH.com. It's like Homestuck.GiovanH.com, but without the Homestuck. I do non-Homestuck stuff. I talk about philosophy and fandom and literature and all sorts of weird stuff. I promise if you're listening to this, there's something on there I've written way too much about that interests you. Twitter is collapsing, so it has socials on it too. All right, I'm gonna cede the panel, but thank you all so much for coming down. Thank you for the great questions. Thank you
guys.
Thank you honestly for the interest in the collection. It's been very cool how this has exploded and how people love it, and I'm really glad that we're able to do something so useful for the community.
Definitely, just 100%. It's been crazy.
Yeah.
Just the entire support for it over these years. It's fantastic. Thank you so much, guys.
All right. Peace.
See ya.